Hold on. Add. Yo, yo. Ryan. Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Ryan left there? Hold on. Me. Hello?
Yo,
Ryan, can you hear us?
seems like he's connecting.
Yo, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, dude?
Hey, man.
What's up?
Not much. Chilling. Making a podcast.
Oh yeah, pretty baller.
Yeah. That's what
Moving
we
up in the
do.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, he has
From
to
backed fish to podcast champ.
be. What are you doing? Are you on the live circuit still?
No, I'm in Wisconsin right now, relaxing for a week with some of my fiance's family, and then doing 2 months in Toronto.
Okay.
Cool. Do you want to check sound, Pedro?
No, it's good. I'm recording.
Oh, we're recording right now?
Yeah.
Alright.
No,
Alright,
no
cool.
editing. Don't forget that.
No editing? Alright, so we have guests Ryan, Nelson, Laplante. Did I get the middle name right too?
Yeah, you
Oh
nailed the
man,
middle name, shockingly.
I'm a pro. Uh,
Baller.
Also known as Protential MN on Stars. I don't know what your tilt name is or any others.
Protential on Tilt, Protential on 2+2 poker forums, Protential on most poker forums and stuff, and then got a couple random site names for various things.
Cool.
But Protentialmn on Stars is the main place I play.
Yeah. Thing I remember about you, I guess we haven't talked in a while, is just I think you kind of just crush turbos. I don't know if that's still a thing that's
Yeah, still crushing turbos.
Cool.
Turbos live and PLO8 seems to be my thing.
Cool. So yeah, I guess tell everyone a bit about yourself. I mean, um,
I'll give you guys the short end of it. So I'm 24 years old. Grew up in Minnesota. Hopped around since essentially from 19 to 24. Really done a lot of hopping around due to Black Friday. Did 6 months in Canada and 3 months in Mexico, 3 months in Canada, just hopping around plus Black Friday, doing all that fun stuff. I've about, let's see here, I have about 30,000 tournaments played lifetime, something like that. 25,000, somewhere in that range. Most of my online profits come from turbos or from PLO8. And then let's see here, 3 World Series of Poker, final tables. I have about 1,000 hours of coaching experience, do lots of online and in-person coaching. I've written for Bluff Magazine, been in Card Player, been in pretty much every single major podcast. That's about it.
and
Wow.
you do the Poker Stars replays as well, like the W Coup commentary. I remember.
Yeah, I did WCOOP commentary for Quadjacks.
Oh,
I've
okay.
also done WSOP commentary on their official stream with David Tuckman. I'll be doing that this summer as well, I'm sure, multiple times. Had a lot of fun doing that. That's it for the most part.
Wow.
Pretty busy, dude.
Yeah, I've been decently busy.
How
been
do
fun,
how
though.
do you get from playing mainly turbos online and then jumping right into live stuff? I mean, 3 VSOP final tables. I think that's a dream for a lot of people. And you said
Yeah,
that you mainly focus on turbos, right? Online.
yeah, I've ran pretty decently live at the World Series. So what ended up happening, so Black Friday obviously changed things a lot for everyone. And so with Black Friday, right before it, I had my best month ever. I had a 25K month. I was finally starting to break into mid stakes and actually do well. That 25K month, it cleared my makeup and I pocketed just a tiny bit of money. And then bam, Black Friday hits. And for that World Series, I was just planning on going for the last, week and a half with the main. and selling a bit of a package and having my backer take a big chunk. And then with Black Friday, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I wasn't even 21 yet when Black Friday hit. I'd like 3 weeks ago before my 21st birthday, actually 4 weeks. So I was just twiddling my thumbs in Wisconsin with like nothing to do since it's 21 plus to play poker in Wisconsin. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, why don't you go play full World Series? I'm like, I mean, maybe. And he's like, yeah, you could just sell a package. You could use a markup to help cover for travel expenses and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, you could probably find someone to stay with. In fact, you'd probably even stay with me, share a hotel room, yada, yada. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I could do that. That makes a lot of sense. And so I ended up doing that. And first 2 weeks went pretty badly. Then I ran into Mr. Negreanu, who at the time I was just a huge, huge fanboy of, and still am. I still think he's a really good guy, great player, good ambassador for the game. And he like signed that pink Burberry hat that I'm seen wearing like everywhere.
Okay, cool.
And the very next event I played, I cashed in it, and the event after that, I final tabled it.
Nice.
And so at 21 years old, got my first WSOP final table in. Went into it like 10 out of 10. Managed to be chip leader by the time there's 9 people left without going to showdown, just running over the table. Then we bricked a straight flush draw for like 25% of the chips in play. Ace king to kings. So I had a pretty good start there. I ended up taking like 8th for like 50 grand or whatever. And pretty much just never looked back. The next year went back to the World Series, played another big package, and final tabled another event, final tabled a Venetian side event too. And so like because I've been like traveling around so much and have had some live success, pretty much decided about a year and a half ago to make like Vegas my home station for the most part. So when I'm in Las Vegas, there's a lot of live stuff to play. There's tons and tons and tons and tons of live stuff. So I've been getting in lots of practice playing these little side small series and stuff and keeping my game really, you know, really on key for the live grind. And that allows me to just continue to do really well live when the big series come around. So I think my third World Series I like uber bricked, but I think I had like 2 min caches that World Series. But like uber bricking 2 min caches out of 30 tournaments or whatever, it's like whatever. It's not, you know, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And then last World Series was just incredible for me. I had 5 deep runs with the final table. And all the deep runs, like any single one of them, I could have turned into more final tables. Like I took like 23rd or something like that on the 2500 with like 30 people left. I under full housed versus Jerry Yang in a massive, massive pot on a single paired board.
Wow.
In which I thought it'd be almost impossible for him to have me beat. I was like fist pumping, getting the money in, and then I was like, what? So it took like 23rd in that, 1K turbo.
That's what you get. That's what you get for going up against the world's main event champs, bro.
That's what I get for going up against a world champ.
Yeah.
And like the
Should
1K
never do
turbo,
that,
I
man.
built up a massive stack too. Had like a really dirty run out and a really, really huge pot that ended up not going my way. And then the 5K, I got honeyed right on the money bubble. I got him to 5-bet jam on me by inducing a fake tell, which he fell for, and told me afterwards that that was the only reason why he 5-bet jammed on me. And he like got there for like near chip lead pot right on the money bubble. And like the money bubble in the 5K is only like 60 people. So the difference between like having a short stack with 60 people and being one of the chip leaders with 60 people is huge difference, especially in that kind of field. So yeah, last summer went really, really well for me. And like outside of that, I've just been doing really well also. After the World Series final table, another like 1K. Then I actually finally got in my first televised final table earlier last year too, in November, and final tabled Heartland Poker Tour event. Got another like really good live score. I feel as though like I happen to be like fairly lucky that I'm one of the few online guys who transitions well to live. I feel as though live there's not as much data. There's almost as much information, and that information is so key. So if you miss anything, it's just really, really, really bad. So I try to stay like fairly focused when I play live. I try not to really listen to too much music. I only have like one earbud in. Try not to wear sunglasses or anything like that. And for the most part, try to stay talkative as well. And I feel as though like staying focused live and really paying attention to what's going on. Plus the fact that most live tournaments are essentially turbos, which plays hugely into my strength of being mostly a strong math and theory guy.
Yeah. What do
Did
like
Go
that
ahead, Pedro.
psychology behind? I mean, if I understood you correctly, Black Friday hit. When was that actually? Was that in February or April or something?
April
15th.
April 15th,
April. Okay.
2011.
So then you went on to play the World Series the same year, if I understood you correct, right?
Hmm?
You went on playing the World Series in the same year after your buddy
Yeah.
asked
Yep.
you, right? Okay, so basically the
Yep.
psychology behind having your biggest month ever, which was 25K, and then jumping right into like I guess 1Ks, 2.5Ks, and stuff like that. Did you
Mhm.
ever think about it, or you just had like, okay, let's just jump right into it? How was that for you?
Yeah, I pretty much just jumped right into it. I mean, I was pretty disheartened after the first 2 weeks of just like mostly bricking. I
Yeah,
mean, I understood how little volume stuff I was playing, but I don't know. I feel as though like my first year out there, I probably wasn't the best adjusted for live and just I mean I'm sure I played fairly well, but I also know that I just ran like incredibly peer to final table. I mean you have to run incredibly peer to final table, but I don't think like my first year out there that I'd like a really large live edge on people. Like I don't feel as though that I had anywhere close to the skills that I have now as far as playing live goes. I probably like missed out on tons of information, played versus people incorrectly in a lot of spots. And, a lot of that first year was definitely just me running good when it mattered and just getting really lucky for the most part. I definitely played fine. I mean, my game definitely, like, relative to where everyone else is at was, still decent. I was still I would say maybe back then I'd class myself as like an okay mid-stakes reg, if that. So like obviously I was plus EV playing those like 1Ks and 1500s and stuff, but I don't feel as though that there's anything that I specifically really did that year that, ensured that I would be successful that summer or anything.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the going from live to online was such a big transition for me as well. And is there any difference in like, I'm not sure if you even like do stuff like this, but energy management, how you focus, for example? Because I remember reading Vanessa Self's podcast or something, and she was
Hmm.
saying early stages she doesn't even try that much. She tries to just save her energy for late game when playing live. Seems like you kind of have a different strategy for that.
Yeah, I'd rather just not miss any information ever. I think like
Hmm.
anything early on can be so important. I'd much rather use as much energy as I possibly can the entire way through and just be, in good enough mental shape to fight through, any energy used. So, I mean, obviously at the end of any of my sessions when I play live, I feel like really drained. That's because of the amount of effort I put towards playing. But I feel as though that like the thing is that if you miss information in a single hand live, that's going to be 3% of the information that hour or even more, 3 to 5% of all of the information that hour. And even if you look at like over the course of like, let's say you expect to be at that same table for like 6, 7 hours on average. If you were missing like information constantly in the early stages, so let's say you do it like Selp says to do. Let's say for the first 3 hours, you miss like 80% of the available information because you're only really paying attention when you're playing.
yeah,
Any of that information could be useful in later hands. For instance, like just picking up, even subconsciously, some amount of information on someone and being able to use that against them later on. I don't even mean things like bet sizing tells, bet sizing speeds, the way people handle their chips away from hands, during hands. But like there's so much information available during live hands throughout the course of even an hour that I feel as though not paying attention hurts me so drastically that if I'm not going to be like focused and really there, that it probably isn't like that great of an idea for me to really be playing that event, unless of course it's something like, like a Win 300 or Win 600, one of the local smaller live buy-ins, or one of the smaller live buy-ins, in which case the field is so soft that paying attention probably doesn't matter that much. But still, it like you really shouldn't be playing like anything remotely difficult unless you're like ready to be focused and be focused the entire time, the entire session.
Yeah, so how do you sustain your energy throughout the whole thing? Are you on like, does it have to anything to do with diet or exercise or any type of mental stuff that you do between hands or what?
No, I mean, I'm not like that unhealthy. I definitely need to like eat healthier. So in Toronto, I'm actually going to be working out daily and eating really healthy. Like life for me has always just been like really easy. I've just like always really enjoyed playing live. I've always been able to stay relatively fairly focused compared to most people and generally have been able to really stay on top of what I need to when I play live. And I don't really feel as though that I mean, obviously at the end of, a long grind session, I'm always like exhausted, but I feel as though that I've just have the type of personality and the way that my brain built is built that playing live and focusing like that is just comes natural to me and I'm perfectly fine with doing that. That being said, anytime I start feel as though like I'm really not like focusing as much. So let's say maybe I'm starting to pay too much attention to things like Twitter and Skype and checking emails and, doing that kind of stuff. And I'll do things like put my phone into airplane mode and just listen to the music that I have on there so I'm not distracted by anything. I'll do things like if I feel like I'm really low on energy, depending on how I feel specifically, I'll start like drinking tea with honey and lemon. And then if I feel like I'm starting to get really tired and exhausted, I'll just start sipping on a Red Bull. I won't like pound it. I'll just like slowly sip on it so I have that like slow energy boost so I don't have the crash and burn of slamming it back and then going through the energy swing of getting like really hyper and really focused and then just crashing when it wears off. I don't smoke, don't drink, don't do drugs of any kind, which I feel as though definitely helps a lot because I haven't spent a large portion of my, or I haven't spent a decent portion of my life doing things like that, which is probably gives me a little bit of advantage over some live players who have been smoking for most of their lives, smoking pot or cigarettes, or drinking a lot for most of their lives and partying a lot. I don't think that it helps a lot, but it probably helps a little bit with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that stuff's actually pretty detrimental. Not so much the weed, but drinking and partying, staying out till like 2, 3 a.m. I remember I remember I was playing like the 5K6 Max, and some pretty famous player was pretty obvious he was partying the night before and just took a lot of coke or something that night. He was just super hyper that day. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's probably somewhat common, maybe less common these days now that people realize just how much harder the games are getting.
Yeah.
Especially something like the 5K6 Max. Like if I was ever at the point where I was like, hey, that's a good idea to play that. I don't know why it would be, but let's say I was, then if I played in it, I would be like the most focused, like on my game in the zone possible. Otherwise, there's no way that you can't be and be very profitable in that unless you're just the best or one of the top few players.
Yeah, and I mean
There may be
even
like 50 players who can be off their A game and still be solidly profitable.
but even like the top players. I mean, I played a bunch of EPTs now, and I mean they all go to the gym. If you go into I don't know how it is in the US, but in
Mhm.
Europe, in all the EPTs that I've been, if you go to the gym in the
Mhm.
hotel, every single day at any time there are pros working out there. Every single day, they're like at least. I mean, in Barcelona there were like 5 to 10. Like Nick Grauner was there. I don't even Kurganov, I don't know, like all these guys, like everybody's just been there, and what I see more and more, they just focus, they eat healthy. None of them takes like huge monster breakfast right before the tournament starts or something. They just eat
Mm.
like relaxed, stay in the sun as long as they can, and yeah, this is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, it's great that people are doing that, but it's definitely like bad for me that people are aware of just like how important that kind of stuff is. I
Yeah.
mean, I always thought that one of my advantages as a grinder is that I feel as though overall I have pretty strong work ethic. I'm not worried about, putting in 80 hours a week for months straight, with studying and coaching and just doing everything on top of the full grind as well,
Yeah.
and I've always felt as though that the fact that I am a little bit more straight-laced definitely helps as well. I don't degen or anything like that, which, people doing that, like not that many people in the past used to do that kind of stuff. And now like everyone's like getting more and more focused on how important it is to be very aware of how you treat your body and mind
Yeah,
and how big of an
absolutely.
impact that's going to have on your game these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, have you seen the podcast with Jason Kuhn?
Mm-mm.
Like, what was that? Like a week ago or two, maybe, where they talked a lot about fitness, about health. And I mean, this guy's maybe the second fittest poker player that is around there, and it's just incredible what these guys do nowadays. I mean, everybody's getting like a personal trainer. I mean, this is just
Mm-hmm.
a pretty common thing nowadays. I think, and yeah, it's just no, you're right for sure. It's just definitely something that gets more and more common.
Yeah, definitely. Like even I'm going to be like I'm not one for working out and that kind of stuff really. I mean, I do enough where at least I move around and go on walks and stuff and try to stay a little active, but like throughout my entire Toronto grind, I'm definitely going to be working out most days and really moving around and eating fairly healthy. And I think it'll definitely show in my overall energy levels at the end of grind sessions and stuff too. And I feel
For
as though
sure.
especially for like playing online, I mean, those sessions are brutal. I mean, the end of a live grind, sure, I'll feel like somewhat tired and stuff, but like at the end of a, 10, 12, 14-hour online session over which I played 70 to 100 tournaments, I just feel completely and totally exhausted, mind, body, everything.
Right,
It
for sure.
seems like, I mean, it seems like you do something that a lot of poker players just can't do. Like you basically just been putting in 80-hour weeks consistently. How
Yeah.
do, how do you do that? Why do you do that? Why are you so driven? What what drives Ryan to just grind so endlessly and do everything that he does?
I mean, honestly, I still love the game. Like I didn't like I don't play poker because I think it's the best way for me to make money. Best way for me to make money would be to have stayed in Minnesota, gotten a business degree, and work with my stepdad. Like hands down, I'd be far better off financially if I did that than playing poker, without a doubt. Zero, zero, zero doubt. So I don't play poker because I feel it's an easy way out. In fact, I feel as though like of my options, it's probably like one of the harder things I could do to be financially well off. And because I don't play because I view it's an easy way, I feel as though that I'm able to stay much more focused on what my goals are with it and what I'm trying to achieve, and that pushing myself towards those goals is essentially what keeps me going as far as being able to put in those kinds of hours. I feel as though a lot of players, less so now than the past, but like in the past, everyone just viewed it as, oh, I can play poker, it's this game, we can, just degen and have fun and make bank and money will rain from the sky and I'll have
Yeah,
tons of freedom and all that stuff.
it's good
And
old
as the game
times.
gets harder and harder,
Bling bling
a lot
blow.
of yeah, bling bling blow, money on rub money on my titties, yo, that kind of stuff. And like I feel as though like that kind of mindset, that while a lot of pros are getting away from it, so many of them were hurt by years and years of relatively really easy games. And not really focusing on like improving themselves and getting better. While the entire course of my career, the things I've been focusing on are A, trying to put in volume, and B, trying to get better. And that's why I feel as though for most of the game types that I play, that relative to the rest of like the overall curve of the game getting incredibly more difficult and harder, that I've been able to not only keep up with the curve, but surpass it. So not only relatively am I getting better compared to previous me, but I've also relatively been getting better to the rest of the field as well. Like in the past, like maybe let's say a year and a half ago, I think like relatively to everyone else that my turbo game was definitely my best game, not even close. But now, while yes, I still can say that my turbo game is definitely really good and that it stayed about where it's at relative to everyone else, I feel as though that my reg speed game has also gotten to the point where it's like close to that relative to everyone else because I've been working so hard on getting better with it. So I can't even say that my turbo game is my best game right now. I feel as though that it's relatively probably about as good as my reg speed game and that my PLO8 tournament game is by far my best game right now. Not even close. And it's because I've been working so hard on getting better. I've been working really hard on doing things like coaching, on making consistent income, on doing things like fixing my tilt. I used to be a massive, 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 massive tilt box.
I
So
remember you
fixing
going
that was,
off in our Skype group chat,
yeah,
like 2, 3 years ago.
yeah, I was bad. I was really bad. And like, so fixing those things. So like,
Well,
my
wait,
main
how did you fix the tilt issues, or are they fixed?
Yeah, I would say they're mostly fixed. Obviously, everyone still tilts a bit. Doesn't matter who you are. You still, at least everyone has like momentary tilt, where it's
Mhm.
like you get frustrated in the moment about wanting to have won that pot or won in that situation or whatever. And the people who just don't really tilt are those who, like once you're in like a financial position where it literally doesn't matter at all, I feel as though it's really easy to not tilt. And but also the fact that I feel as though once you stop focusing on playing poker and having it be about making money, but playing poker and have it being about great decisions, like that's like one of the keys in not tilting is that if you can look back through the course of the hand and be like, yes, I played that perfectly. I wouldn't have changed a thing. I feel as though that tilting is just pointless because you did what you could control, and whether you win or lose, it technically doesn't really matter, as poker really isn't about winning or losing. It's about making great decisions and then just hoping that those decisions work out well. And if you instead are focused on, playing poker to just do well and make money, that anytime you lose, you get frustrated, especially in like big situations. That being said, I still feel as though that because I haven't quite had the amount of success I would like to have had, or, haven't had the amount of success that I feel as though I want to achieve in the game, that obviously when I do get sucked out on in big situations or whatever, that I still have that momentary tilt, but it's definitely isn't as extreme. It'll be like, maybe I'll get like, 2 out or deep in the weekly turbo or whatever. And, I might cuss, but like after like 4 seconds, I like don't even care anymore and I'm back on the grind and it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Or like, great example would be, so Heartland Poker Tour, 18 people left, get all in on the turn as a 96% favorite in a ridiculous pot for ship lead. It was for like 20% of the chips in play with 18 people left, or
Okay.
something equally ridiculous.
Yeah, okay.
And he smashes a 2-outer on the river, and I like jump up, cuss, like walk away from the table, say that, it's so fucking standard or whatever, and I'm like pissed for like 30 seconds. I walk around and I like calm down, I sit back down, and I'm perfectly fine. I'm back to playing. And my play didn't shift at all based on that. So like I feel as though like I still will have like those momentary.
What was like the self-talk in that 30 seconds? How did you go from just being super pissed to not? Like, what did you do?
It was just focusing on the fact that I still have the tournament to play. that I played the hand perfectly. I really wouldn't have changed anything. I mean, I got him to stack off with king queen on like king deuce 4-4, and it was like 140 big blind pot or something like that, where I three bet pre-flop and he just couldn't let it go. And it was versus like a fairly competent player too, and like just the way overall that I've been playing and everything, like I managed to like set up the hand where I knew he would never fold like a decent king to me there, and he ended up stacking off. And when they smash the two out, or when you play it perfectly, that's just poker. That's all she wrote. That's If that stuff didn't exist, the game wouldn't exist. And I just focused on the fact that I played the hand great, and I still had poker to play left, and that if I didn't calm down immediately, that I was going to cost myself a lot of money. So I just calmed down immediately and went back to playing.
Yeah, so you kind of just focused on what you could control rather
Yep.
than all the shit that you couldn't.
So I feel as though that like I will still be frustrated in those moments, but that overall I've definitely curbed it back to probably about as much as I'll be able to, at least until maybe I have a little bit more success than what I've had. I mean, just having like a huge financial like cushion and then grinding definitely feels a lot different than maybe not struggling, but like having, your having the next 6 months matter. Having like the difference between 10K and 100K, having that like have a real impact on your life. I still feel as though that when like that big of a like when the difference between 10K and 100K in a cash can like have a strong positive impact on your life. But obviously getting frustrated in those moments is going to happen, but that letting it
Yeah,
control you for more than momentarily is just, it's so bad on so many levels that you really shouldn't be playing the game if you can't fix that. And
yes.
I realized that a while back, that if I didn't fix my tilt and if I didn't control it, that I shouldn't be playing this game professionally, and that just wasn't acceptable to me. So I just focused on doing what I could to fix it.
Yeah, this seems like a huge change for you. I remember you would constantly just go off in the Skype chat, and not for like a
Yeah,
short period of time, just like, very complainy type of stuff, and not to
yeah,
like offend you,
definitely.
just like
No,
show
I
like
was
the stark
horrible.
difference. Yeah.
I'll be the first to admit that I was so bad. Like, I was just facepalm worthy bad. It was just atrocious.
So was it like just light switch, things just changed, or was it just like, a bit of a struggle to kind of change your mindset and you slowly got better, or somewhere in the middle? What was this journey like? Because I think everyone knows that, oh yeah, I shouldn't be mad. Then they get mad
Hmm.
because they're mad, and that just
Right.
kind of makes it worse. So how did you how did you make such a huge shift?
Honestly, Tommy Angelo, one of his blog posts definitely had a huge impact. And it was a post about being thankful. Not because of, I mean, it was a really long post, but it essentially, he ended up mentioning um, part of it. In fact, hey, let me find it. It's in my 2+2, my blog.
Yeah, cool. If you could post the link here, we'll keep it in like show notes and stuff.
Okay, yep, found it. So it in part had to deal with this post. And the title of his post is Ingratitude of Gratefulness. So being thankful for being thankful. So the post was essentially about how, so it starts off like, having like a mother tell someone to finish their food, think of the starving children in China, or starving children in China, blah. And, that saying, like, it just isn't really useful because you can't really like empathize with something like that. So instead, you should focus on something that you can really like relate to your world. So something
Yeah.
like, say, like, isn't it incredible that we can have this conversation right now? That something like the internet exists, and that not only does it exist, but it's already like at this point of, technological advancement where we can instantaneously, you know, talk to each other and do things like video chats and so on and so forth, or the fact that online poker even exists. So instead of just focusing on the things that I really wanted to achieve or really want to achieve yet, instead I focus on the things that I have, and that, that it's very fortunate that, things like clean water, easy access to food, that, you know, electricity, that, I wasn't born 100 years ago, because the difference of being gay now and being gay 100 years ago would be entirely different. Or just lots of things that I have currently that I can be very thankful for. The fact that I'm engaged and going to be married soon, like all of that kind of stuff. And the fact that I was able to start being grateful for little things that most people just take for granted these days, really helped me start to overcome my tilt issues.
Yeah, I think I just get really pissed at times when like I see people complain about their iPhone 4 because it's like a little bit slow. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like you're a grateful piece of shit. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like one of the most amazing inventions in human history, in my opinion.
The
Yeah.
fact that we can have like a little cell phone in your hand that is 1,000 times more powerful than the computers that took people to the moon. I mean, come on.
Got to
Yeah.
put things in perspective for sure.
Right, definitely. And I feel as though like most people instead compare themselves to the people that they want to be like. So like, if you compare your personal poker success to someone like, say, Daniel Negreanu, you're just going to be pissed off 24/7. Or to like compared to like friends of yours or whatever. And instead like comparing yourselves to others, you should just compare yourself to previous you and just focus on the things that you control and try to get better with those things. And it's definitely something that's really hard to do. It hasn't been easy like getting to that point. So that little blog post and stuff, like it like jump started me. And like slowly as I played more and more, I would slowly start to tilt less and less. It definitely wasn't like an immediate, it definitely wasn't immediate, a huge jump, but like it was enough of a jump where my brain was starting to just accept things that happen and move forward. And obviously I still do get frustrated with things, but compared to in the past where it'd have a huge negative impact, not only on my poker game, but also on the rest of my life, compared to now where the longest I'm ever frustrated is for a couple of seconds. And I definitely don't have like extended tilt anymore either. So I still might get like frustrated if I FT bubble a major while I'm in Canada, but it probably won't last for longer than, a couple of minutes or, until after the session. And I'm sure if it lasts for any longer than a few minutes, I'm probably in like a really, really, really bad mood because of something else.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, I
sense.
think the idea of kind of just changing your brain, its habits, is huge. I think everyone's just kind of stuck in these negative patterns. They don't ever stop and think about what they have.
Hmm.
It's more just about what they want. And Tony Robbins talks a lot about this. He has this
Hmm.
really great morning routine where you kind of start. I think he starts off with this kind of breathing exercise. You know, you breathe in.
So meditate.
Not a
Yeah,
he.
he hates meditating.
It's he doesn't like meditating. It's like you take 4 steps and you breathe in. You take steps and you breathe out. 4 steps, breathe in. 4 steps, breathe out. You do that for a few minutes. Then you kind of listen to your favorite music for 5 minutes. Then after that, I think you just sit down and you just really try and feel what you're grateful for.
Hmm.
So, you know, not just think about it, just, you know, really feel it, like really feel the emotion behind it. And
Hmm.
I remember during this part, I would often just like burst out in tears because feel so grateful and so happy for the things I had. And I was going
Hmm.
through a pretty dark time. And, you know, just really just sitting there and really feeling, you know, how grateful for you are, for even for like small little things. And it'll have you even feel grateful think about feeling grateful for things that you're going to achieve in the future. Just kind of cool as well. And then he would do these incantation things at the end, which were kind of cool at times, but kind of weird. It's like you say these like small chants to yourself or whatever, like "I will not quit" or something like that. Some kind of motivational thing. And I just remember just being super hyped up and a really good mindset afterwards. That was really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds
that
like
definitely works.
great exercises to do if you're someone who's really struggling with those kinds of things.
And one thing that was pretty cool about what he said was he said that he's doing this for 35 years, every single day, working with I mean, think about the people that he's working with, President Obama and I don't even know. And he said even a guy like him needs morning routines like that, or like routines like that keep him on track. And I think
Right.
a lot of people think that they just take it for granted that they're motivated. And I think that's great.
Mhm.
It's great that you're motivated if you are. But if you
Mhm.
think about the next 10, 20 years, you want to stay motivated. You don't want to lose that passion or focus.
Right.
And so a guy like him who's like working like this for 35 years, we would be not that smart to ignore that advice, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I could definitely see how that would end up being incredibly useful, and I definitely feel as though things that can help you stay really focused and stay motivated are really, really, really important. I mean, you don't need to do necessarily that exactly, but try to find your own thing that is similar to that can help you keep on track for the things that you want.
Yeah.
Have you tried stuff like reframing events and scenarios that kind of, things that kind of happen to you that are kind of seemingly bad? So to give you like a very specific
Yeah,
example.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So I
A
won't get into
perfect example is so 21 final tabling that event. I actually think if I'd won it, that it probably would have been a bad thing
Hmm.
because it would have given me like a reasonable bankroll. Like it would have given me a six-figure bankroll, and I would have been like fairly immature.
Would you have been like the gay Dan Bilzerian?
No, no, not quite. But like I feel as though like the downswing that I went through afterwards would have been much, much, much harder on me. And that it could have been, bad enough to the point where, I would have been even more, maybe more like frustrated and annoyed and angry, maybe to the point of, even wanting to quit the game. So after the World Series, moved up to Toronto for 6 months. And the first, let's see here, 1 second, let me pull up Sharkscope. It was a bad first, like, 4 months, essentially. Let's see here. So I moved up to Canada. It would have been November of that year, like end of November. And the first 3 months, and so from the end of November until mid-February, I went on essentially probably like a 40K downswing on stars, plus then, let's see here, was Full Tilt still operating then? I don't remember if my Full Tilt multi-entry stuff was during that or not. I think, do you guys remember when Full Tilt went down?
No, not really.
Was that
No.
early 2012?
I have really no clue. I didn't even
I
play
think
back
that might have
then
been,
on Full Tilt, I think.
no?
No.
I don't remember when that was. So I think I added some makeup from PokerStars downswing, from like Full Tilt, 888, Party Poker. So at one point I was like 75K in makeup. Not only was I 75K in makeup, but I was 75K in makeup, having dragged at the time was my boyfriend, still with them, the now fiance. And so I convinced him that it would be a good idea to move to another country with me when he'd barely lived away from home, that it'd be a good idea for me to play these, mid to high stakes tournaments and that I would do well. But instead, I spent 3 months just losing. And as like my downswing got worse and worse, I got more and more frustrated because I was putting so much pressure on myself to do well. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to do well because, to prove my backer that I was worth backing, to prove to Chris that, to prove to my fiance that it was a good idea to play poker professionally, that it was a good idea to go to Canada, like all this stuff. So over the course of this downswing, which is probably like half run bad, half me just not doing stuff that I should have been, either bad game selection or just playing badly for the games that I was in or whatever. So like, because of that 3-month time period, I added like 75K to make up. And at like the bottom of it, I realized that if I didn't just stop tilting and if I didn't fix whatever I was doing, that it just was going to go very, very, very badly for me. And I feel as though that if I had that same downswing, but instead it was mostly on my own money, and instead it was after having achieved something like winning a bracelet, that I feel as though that downswing would have hurt me mentally a lot more than taking the 8th place and then doing this back, that it probably would have been a lot harder for me to get out of my funk.
Man, that's a crazy story,
So,
for sure.
Luckily enough, like when I fixed that, I went on the heater of heaters and was out of makeup in like a month and a half playing a $30 average buy-in.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I went on like a 90K heater over the next 3,500 games.
Yeah.
Won like everything.
Yeah, I think that framing like big things is pretty interesting, like the psychological framing from like negative to positive.
Mm-hmm.
Even for small things, I find it pretty interesting. I remember I was meditating and, I have 2 daughters, so I just constantly get interrupted, right?
Yeah.
And I remember just being really upset. And, I think it's an accurate representation to kind of just be kind of upset and negative about it. Like,
Mhm.
oh man, I'm trying to fucking meditate. And, like, these kids are annoying me. I'm like, well, it's also just as accurate to say, well, I'm I'm kind of like a single dad at the moment. I'm like still trying to find time to meditate with 2 kids, and
Ouch.
even though that they're bothering me, I still have 2 kids right now who I love and who love me or whatever. So it's really not that bad. Like, and in the long run, how much is this really going to affect me getting interrupted for 2 seconds while in the middle of meditating? And, after that, I kind of just had like a big smile on my face, just feeling so stupid about it. And it's just kind of interesting, like the things that, I used to worry about, or, I still do it, but, things I used to worry about and get stressed out about. And I kind of just asked myself a question, like, how big of a deal is this going to be, like, the next day or a few hours from now? The answer is almost always just, it's no. It's just not going to be a big deal at all. You're not going to remember any of this,
Yeah.
And just trying to be present and just reframe things in a positive light, because I think almost a lot of things can just be reframed positively.
Yeah, definitely.
And still be accurate. I mean, I think you go overboard when it's like you frame things positively, when it's like that's an inaccurate description of what's going on, And I don't know, like The Secret type of stuff, you know what I mean? If anything I think of will happen or whatever, I just have to dream it and I could do it. Or some of the stuff like Negreanu gets slack for with Choice Center.
Yeah.
Although I heard he's like pretty interesting with the whole mindset stuff. And
yeah, definitely. I feel as though that, so a lot of people do give him shit for Choice Center, but some of the stuff that they talk about is actually good for you. Like, so I've spoken with him and a couple others who've gone through it about like what they actually talk about and try to get you to do. And a lot of it is simply about trying to achieve essentially happiness through emotional awareness and gratefulness.
Yeah.
So being aware of who you are as a person, being aware of um, being aware of people around you, but more importantly, just accepting who you are, being happy with who you are and what you have, no matter how well you do or how poorly you do, and just being happy in spite of anything and everything, and essentially not really caring about what happens, and being essentially able through that stuff to focus on creating happiness. And yes, some of the stuff they do is definitely very cultish, and I personally would never want to go through it myself, but some of the stuff they definitely talk about is very Tony Robbins-esque about just achieving mindfulness and happiness through emotional awareness. And there's definitely some good things that they definitely preach and teach. And if you've ever met Daniel or hung out with him at all, I mean, I've never met anyone who has a truly bad thing to say about him.
Yeah.
He is his personality on TV, on Twitter, on anything is the exact same thing that you find in person. He is just a very big personality, and the fact that he pushes his beliefs very strongly is because he believes in them very strongly, and that I've never seen him do or heard about him doing something that would be scummy or self-serving really or anything like that. He is just very Daniel, and I think that pushes people wrong.
Yeah.
But if you pay attention to the stuff that he actually says about, having goals, being very positive about those goals, and being happy no matter what happens, that's all things that can definitely have a very positive impact on your poker game and on the rest of your life. And I've definitely have been trying my best to do those kinds of things. And I definitely feel much better about everything in general because of that. Because of being, I don't think that being positive will necessarily have a positive impact just because I'm positive. I don't believe in, the secret stuff. I think it's mostly bull. That being said, being positive can definitely have a positive impact because your brain is much more aware and open and focused, and you don't get frustrated as easily. So, people who aren't positive, they take a two-outer, they get frustrated, and they focus on their frustration and the negative thing that occurred because things aren't going their way. But if you're positive and you think you're going to do well and you're confident in yourself, then you take that two-outer, you just shrug it off and keep playing because, well, you're still going to win anyway, so who cares?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of people have that problem to rationalize that. Exactly what you just said. For a lot of people, I think they would just say, that makes sense. I agree. You went through that. What was that huge problem? You had to understand exactly what you just explained. For example, what you said about the 2+2 post that you made there by Tommy Angelo, right? Yeah, by Tommy. So
Yep.
you read it, and I mean, you understood the words, obviously, and we all do.
Right.
We read it and we understand it, but there's some deeper misunderstanding there. What do you think
I
is it
think
that people have?
I think what most people don't I think what most people don't realize is that their frustration comes from their ego.
Yeah.
And their ego is focusing on the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
Their ego, when they get frustrated when they lose, is focusing on, hey, I want more, I deserve more, give me more. That's what your ego is saying. So when you don't have more, so when you have less because someone sucked out on you, your ego is saying, hey, why does he have that? That's mine. I deserve that. I played well. He got lucky. Fuck him. That's what your ego's saying. And that's why you get mad and angry, is because your ego is just throwing a tantrum. So when your ego is throwing a tantrum because of that, it's hard for you to rationalize with it, because your ego isn't a rational thing. It's emotional. It is like your core emotions screaming that they want, they need, they deserve, so on and so forth. So instead of having your ego focus on the reality of you no longer having that, you need to train your ego to instead focus on purely making good decisions. Because when your ego focuses on that, like, so over the past couple of months, the hands and situations that I've been most tilted about, and I can still go back and remember them, are the times in which I didn't do something that I would have done looking back at it. And not even what my decision was necessarily in the moment, whether it's good or bad, but I get more tilted about why I reached the decision that I did. So perfect example. I was playing in a local $1,600 buy-in tournament at a place that shall not be named. And it was a really good structured event, and it was I think like getting near the end of day one or whatever, and I was, had a really good stack. I think I had like maybe like 90 big blinds when average was like 60. So like it was still like
The
fairly
fuck kind of
early
local
in.
event is this? I see why you're keeping it under wraps. I imagine just no regs go there.
No, all the regs go there. Just people don't like talking about going there.
Okay.
For various reasons,
Okay.
due to the owner. Hint, hint.
Okay.
So like so I ended up playing a really big pot with this like hyper aggro reg, quote unquote. Like young player, is just like way too aggro, like stupid crazy aggro, way over the top, like doing tons of crazy stuff. So the hand played out like this. I opened ace queen under the gun. He 3-bets in mid position fairly large. We're both playing about 100 big blinds deep. I'd say I have like 3 starting stacks to start the hand. So like a decent start, but like it's not like that big of a pot yet. I can still remember pretty much everything that occurred like in really decent detail. So he 3-bets me, I call. I have ace queen, flop is ace queen 10, I check. And when he c-bets like pot. He c-bets like just under pot. And I know for a fact that when he does this, that he's going to be really weak. Just the way he'd been playing everything in general, that he's just full of it. And when I like start tanking there, I knew that kings and jacks were like the only cards on the turn I didn't want to see no matter what. So like when I call, the main thing I'm focused on is, please, for the love of God, no king, no jack, and let me get this kid stack. Turns a king, and when the king hits, I start to get frustrated because I knew that I was going to get this kid stack and all other cards, and I knew that on those cards that it would be pretty likely that a lot of his flop bluff range would smash that card. So it's pretty likely that when the turn's a king that he just sucked out on me, that he now either has ace king or 10 jack or queen jack or jack 9 or so on and so forth. So I hated that card so much that I stopped thinking. That instead I was just frustrated. I check, he checks back, river's like a 4, I check, and he like essentially shoves for like 1.3x pot. And whether I'm supposed to fold or not doesn't matter. I did fold. And the thing is that even if he had showed me that he had a jack and that folding was in the moment the correct decision, I would still be pissed off at myself right now because I didn't arrive at the correct conclusion for the correct reasons. I don't know what he had. In fact, I'm very positive that he was bluffing. But even if he had showed me that he had a straight or higher 2 pair or a set, I still think that the way in which I reached that decision was so bad that it still annoys me looking back at it because my brain essentially just shut off. And I feel as though that something like that matters incredibly more than, getting re-2-outered or whatever. Like I'm more annoyed about that than I am about getting re-2-outered on day 3 of the Bellagio 10K for like 50 big blinds.
Yeah, I think it's not that people don't understand that they need to do this. I think it's just really hard to detach themselves from their thoughts and their beliefs or feelings.
Mhm.
I remember this Twitter conversation you had with Dan O'Brien. You probably forgot it, but for some reason it stuck out in my head because I don't know, it's just really interesting. You know,
Mhm.
you guys were debating some subject, and you were pretty strongly like arguing in your point, and then Dan O'Brien comes up with something, and you're like, "Oh wait, you're right, Dan. Like I was wrong." And then Dan tweets back at you, it's like, "Oh wow, it's like just so rare that someone's just willing to change their mind and listen to what you have to say."
Mhm.
And there's no way you could do that without just being able to kind of detach from your thoughts and emotions and feelings. And I guess people just kind of identify, like most people, you tell them they're wrong, and that's like an attack on their ego
For
Right.
sure.
because they can't break that identity. And if you're not starting from that point, being able to kind of detach from your thoughts, which I guess is a process of just reflection, right?
Mhm.
Um, I guess most people don't reflect. They kind of experience things, perhaps, but they don't reflect. And if you're not going to start with reflection, it's just really hard to really
Make any
see,
progress.
yeah, really see what your problems are. Like you said, I know what you know what your ego's doing, what your ego's saying, and why you get pissed deep in tournaments, and what situations you'll get pissed in the future, or whatever. And that takes a lot of reflection, which is something people don't do. Just kind of why people are just generally not very good at logic, which is kind of
Mhm.
just this reflective practice. So, if someone's listening to this, I guess it's just you have to start reflecting. And I'm not sure exactly what to tell them to do, but, how do you reflect on things? Is it just how are you how are you able to detach from your thoughts? Do you remember a time where you weren't detached from your thoughts and, how you went from where you were now, where you were then to where you are now?
I just I don't know like when I really started to do it, but the reasons why I play poker and continue to do so revolves entirely around, me wanting to be successful. And, be successful not just in general, but be successful in the game. Like at one point in my life, I would like to maybe not to be considered the best, but at least to be in the phrasing of, oh yeah, Laplante, he's pretty, he's one of the better players, that kind of thing. And not just my poker game, but also the impact I've had in the community and in general, where, which is why I do things like Twitch and why I do things like podcasts and write for magazines and, so on and so forth. It's because I want to have an impact on the industry. And part of that comes down to just ego that I have that, wanting to be successful all comes down to ego. And if your ego is focused on something like that, a lot of like to some degree being successful in poker will end up coming down to at least having a huge impact will sometimes end up coming down to something like having a ridiculous heater live, like the heater like Anthony Zeno's on. Like people will remember who he is for a long time, and people will also have him in the phrasing of what a top tier player, or like Marvin Rettenmeyer, or so on and so forth. So part of like because part of poker comes down to getting lucky in these really huge situations, your ego will attach to part of your success being like running good when it matters. So then your ego gets really frustrated and annoyed when you don't. But a lot of that is just short-term variance and bull, and it doesn't really matter that much. If you want to really have a long-term lasting impact on the game, I don't even mean a big way. I just mean like playing professionally, whatever you want to do with the game. If you want to continue playing it 20 years from now professionally, the only way that is going to occur is by continuing to better yourself and continuing to become a much better, much more focused, much more open-minded and learned player. And if you're focused on your results, you're never really going to be able to achieve that because your mind is closed off to what really matters, which is strictly getting better. So I feel as though that the main way that I've really been able to do it is because I knew I knew that the only way that I was going to have any amount of staying power is by, studying and getting a lot better. So I was fortunate enough to have people who backed me to, coach me and to help me get better and then to network and meet the right kind of people and so on and so forth and constantly work on my game. And then as my game got better, I started to realize that, well, my game is like okay, but the way I tilt is so bad that I need to fix that. And the way that I found out how to fix that was to start focusing on the things that actually matter and the things that I can control. So I feel maybe I've just been fortunate that I've always been able to self-reflect and be open-minded to some degree. I feel as though as poker players that the only way that you can truly become one of the game's top tier players is having a fairly open mind, because the way that the game like adapts and changes and evolves so quickly, the only people who are still going to be around like 5 years from now and considered top tier are those people who have incredibly open, dedicated, strong-willed, determined, focused minds, and everyone else is just going to be left in the dust. I feel as though that's why some of the top tier players of today are still top tier players of the day, because not only are they incredibly intelligent, but they're also very open-minded as to what can be done in certain situations. Like, for instance, even something as simple as like min-raising pre-flop. If you told people 5 years ago that min-raising pre-flop would be the standard in tournaments, you would have gotten
Yeah,
laughed out of here.
for sure.
Except for the players who are top tier today, they'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, we should start doing that.
I mean,
I think more like 7 years ago, but yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
I
Pedro.
mean,
like 7 years.
think
You get what I'm
about
saying?
Limpet. This is like a thing that like the top tier players started doing. I don't know, like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and
Yep.
everybody was like, "What is this guy limping under the gun with?" No one was ever expecting. I remember watching Calvin Anderson play a year and a half ago, and he limped under the gun, and then he limped in the cutoff, then he limped, from everywhere, and I was like, "What
Yep.
is he doing there?" And no one did that. And then all of a sudden, Jungle Man, I think it was, limped on the button in some live tournament, and then he called with seven deuce offsuit in the big blind. Everyone was like, "What is he doing?" But because he had like everybody respects Jungleman, no one really talked negative about it. But think about it: 2 years ago, no one was limping, and nowadays you see it more and more and more. More and more people implement limping, and this is the new min raising, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah, it pretty much is. I mean, you don't really see that many people doing it yet, but there are a lot of spots in where it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And not only something like limping, but something that you see even less these days, but I still think has like some really awesome usefulness is like more than like 5xing pre-flop in spots, 4xing pre-flop in spots. When it's folded to. There are a lot of situations in which it makes more sense to open really large than it does to min raise or to fold or to limp, and people just really aren't using very much. And like those kinds of things, like the people who utilize them quickly and correctly and adjust and are very open-minded as to why it is correct in situations, those are the guys that you'll still see 5 years from now doing well.
yeah, I remember 2.5 years ago, a bunch of regs just laughing at me because I was defending the big blind with like 50, 60%. You know what I mean? Just like the most trashiest hand, just be like, oh, LOL, you're so bad and stuff.
Yeah.
And I guarantee like there was some regs who were like, why is he doing that? You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
for sure.
Instead of just laughing at me.
For sure. I mean, nowadays it's like, I mean, you see more and more because of the coaching videos also. I mean, you see guys like Straight Cash on me just defending 9 suited. And,
Yeah.
it gets more and more common. And one other thing that I would like to mention, John Dayton, I mean, you know him, Ryan.
Yeah.
we had a
Good buddy
very
of mine.
interesting talk when I entered Team 651. Basically, we were all just, who are you? And, everybody started meeting each other. And then he was like, okay, who are you? And then I told him my screen name and I asked him what note he has on me. And then he said his exact note was min raise folders 7 big blind stack. And the year I met him was the year that I got second on the leaderboard. And what was funny about it, everybody was laughing at me how bad I was. Everybody's like,
Hmm.
you are so terrible. How can you min raise fold a 7 big blind stack? And I'm like, well, if someone reshoves on me in specific situations, it's so obvious that they have a monster. They are never bluffing.
Hmm.
So it just makes a lot of sense to min raise instead of shoving. So I tried to explain, and everybody's like, no, this is terrible. Nowadays, I mean, also because of Assassinato, I don't know if you saw his videos, but more and more people start thinking about these squats, and I'm like, holy shit, poker's come a long way for people to think about spots rather than just, take a shove chart and be like, okay, let's play like a robot.
Right.
That was really
Yeah,
intense.
these days, if you just don't have an open mind, it's just so bad.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel as though that, like, if you're someone who's listening to this and you don't have a really open-minded approach to the game, like, if you can't see why doing things like raise folding with 7 big blinds, if you just go, oh, why would I ever do that, blah,
Yeah,
you probably shouldn't be playing this game, honestly. And if you can't do stuff like understand why, or at least just open yourself up to trying to always get better and learn that you just aren't going to do well. It's just you really need that open-minded approach and mindset. And also feel as though that having specific goals in the game is also something that's really underrated that more people need. It's just such an easy way to help you stay motivated and to go after those kinds of things that having at least knowing what you want to achieve will just be a huge, huge, huge positive impact overall. And I don't just mean short term, I mean like long term stuff as well. Like it's really easy to have semi short term goals. So like my goals for T-Coop are, or sorry, not for T-Coop, for Scoop for the next couple of months in Toronto will essentially be, I wrote it down in my blog, but essentially it's like play 2,500 plus tournaments. It's it's work out 5 hours a week. It's stream 15 hours a week. It's eat healthy, take 2 days off a week in April, take almost no days off in May, like that kind of stuff. And pretty much all of my goals are all focused on things that I can strictly control.
yeah,
I don't really have a goal in it that isn't something that I can control a lot of. The only one that I have that is run 30% plus ROI in buy-in 0 to 99. And buy-in 0 to 99 will be 90% of my volume. So I'll play about 2,200 of them. So I'll have a decent amount of control in that, and I'll have a decent amount of control in that through the games in which I play during it, over those binds. If I'm only playing, the small field Poker Stars 33 plus, it's going to be kind of difficult for me to really run that kind of ROI just due to them being really reggy and really difficult. But if I'm game selecting well, it'll be really easy for me to achieve that kind of ROI and thus have at least a majority of my volume be very low variance and easy for me to make a decent amount of money through them, and then hopefully I don't do really badly in the high stakes stuff. I don't have like a goal of clear makeup. I don't have a goal of profit X amount. I don't have any kind of goal that isn't really something that I have a huge amount of control over. And having these goals, or at least having things that I can achieve short term, is just another small step. Each one is a small step towards me being successful overall and becoming a top tier player and so on and so forth. So I have these like really vague long term goals in mind, and then reaching those long term goals, I have tons of short term goals that I constantly keep in mind, and those keep me motivated towards that long-term goal.
got it. That's pretty awesome, and I think a lot of people out there, I hope they listen to that, and this is like one of the main things you have to understand about goal setting or anything that has to do with like future planning or something, it has to be in your control. And is there like any book or video or something that you think is very useful, or like article or something like that for that?
As I've said in the past, so Tommy Angelo, like Elements of Poker is great.
Yeah,
Um, who's the other main guy? I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now.
Jared Henley.
Jared.
Yes, Jared Tendler. Jared Tendler, so Tommy Angelo's books are more about like emotional control and all about especially Elements of Poker is a lot about emotional control and not tilting and trying to get your, trying to have the main game that you play, your A game, be as close to your C game and D game as possible. Like I feel as though the difference between me playing my best and me playing like my worst are very, very, very close. Like I feel as though even my worst game, I'm still going to be solidly profitable in like mid stakes online. The majority of the games that I play, with just the exceptions being like the really difficult things. And I feel as though I got a decent amount of that from reading Elements of Poker and trying to incorporate it as much of it as possible into my game. Then I haven't really read much of Jared Tendler, but I know Jared Tendler's books focus on not necessarily emotional control, but more about things like being focused and playing your best and becoming your best and being motivated. And I feel as though like between those two, you have the emotional aspect and then like the motivational aspect, and that those two combined can help turn your overall game to something that's much, much, much better. Something else that I also highly suggest to people is mentoring other players, either through coaching or working with stables or even just getting coaching yourself. That having someone who you talk constantly with that can really open up a dialogue into your game is really, 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 really important. I feel as though that's something that's really helped out my game a lot over the last year and a half is the amount of coaching that I've done.
Same.
Especially, like, I feel as though that for the most part that discussing poker with such a wide range of people and being able to explain to each different type of person that the only way that you can really do so is if you really understand what you're doing. And so a lot of my like recent like jumps in my game will be because a student will ask me a question and I won't be able to articulate why I did something. And when I can't articulate something, then clearly I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about with that subject. So when someone asks me that and I don't know why, I try to figure out why. I take the time to figure it out, theoretically and mathematically. I do a lot of the stuff just by hand and using Poker Stove and ICM Calc and that kind of stuff, and figure out exactly why I do what I do and if it is correct in that spot.
Yeah,
Then once I'm at the point where I can explain it to someone, then I realize that I know it well enough that I can move on to something else. So I've found a lot of big leaks in my game through doing stuff like that.
yeah, I think it's very counterintuitive that helping players that are worse than you is really good for your poker game, but it's just been one of the biggest things for me. It's just been huge, just to kind of have all those different aspects and different mindsets and different ways of looking at the game. It's kind of just been really interesting and helpful. Uh, Going back to like mindsets and reflection, I think this is something you definitely notice. Perhaps you notice it subconsciously, or perhaps you notice it consciously while coaching people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they bring like their mindsets and biases to the table. So you imagine like you coach that tight guy, right? And you constantly you talk to him about spots, and you're like, oh, I'll never bluff here because they always call or whatever. And you're like, no, it's like a really good bluff spot. What are you talking about? I'm sure you've ran into that.
Yep, tons of times.
And it kind of just has to do with those personality types. Like those conservative types, they just remember the times things went bad. And so, they could bluff in a spot, 100 times, have it work 80 times, not, have it not work 20 times. So just remember those 20.
Those 20 times. Your brain, the way that animals in general and humans have evolved is the way that you survive, the way that Darwinism essentially works is you learn what's bad and then you avoid it.
Yeah.
So when something negative occurs, your brain is wired to remember that negative occurrence. So like for instance, some people so let's say you drink a glass of milk and so you pour a glass of milk and you go to drink it. If you drink it without smelling it and making sure that it's still good and it's curdled, your brain will be so pissed off that you did that in the future, if you go to smell milk, for a very long time, it will still smell and seem curdled, and you'll want to avoid it. Even though you know that it's fine, your brain will have that imprint of something negative occurring. It doesn't matter that the rest of the time it was fine. Your brain will still focus on that. This is how people phobias and stuff occurs, that your brain will focus on something negative that occurred in the past and then will stick with you. So because negative occurrences stick out in your brain so much, you have to actively try to stop thinking negatively about certain things. So with stuff like that, you have to explain, sure, this does happen 20% of the time. However, majority of the time when you do something like this, it's going to work out. You just have faith in that it's going to work out. So I coach a large group of older players in Las Vegas. The average age of people in that group is 65, 70. And over the past, I would say 6 months, so after the coaching sessions, we always play a game, either a 2.5-hour tournament or 2 to 3 hours of cash games. And at the start, most of those games stayed a little bit limp-happy, stayed fairly tight and straightforward. How you would expect average, somewhat more conservative, not beginner players, but serious recreational players would play.
Okay.
A lot of Helmuthian style, a lot of tight aggressive or loose passive or so on and so forth. I've actually gotten to the point with them where we've had cold 5-bet bluffs now. That kind of stuff is starting to regularly occur, where people will 3-bet bluff turns and shove rivers light. And the way that it slowly occurred is just trying to get them to stop playing based on fear and instead to just play based off of the information they have available and the way that people have been adjusting and readjusting and so on and so forth. So obviously some people take it to an extreme because they're worried about that. But for the most part, they've been starting to find a balance between various, methodologies and thought processes and ways to adjust in various situations and so on and so forth. And I feel as though helping those kinds of players really open up their minds really helped me out as a coach and as a player, because the way that they approached poker came with 50, 60, 70 years of life experience, and trying to help someone break out of those or that many years of ingrained, activity and mindset definitely was something that was very difficult to do. But now that I've been able to do that, it's been much easier for me to first see where they were. The only way that I was really able to do it was first try to empathize with their thought process about why they were making the decisions in the way that they were. And then to try to approach it from their mindset and then explain the logic in a way that they would understand and agree with. And being able to do that with any kind of player definitely gives you a much better understanding overall of the game and the way that you approach things. So I've been very fortunate to run into the kinds of players and people that I've met, guys like both of you, that have really been able to open up my mind to certain things and have my students help open up my mind as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. Go ahead,
No, no,
Pedro.
just good.
Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of other biases as well that come into play, and I'm kind of just going to highlight these, just kind of like talk about the importance of reflection and open-mindedness. I remember, there's even just the really ego guys where you coach them, there's like, oh yeah, this triple barrel bluff just always fucking works when I have zero
Mm.
equity, and just complete opposite. Or it's like they see a decent rig or whatever kind of rig, just make one bad play and they just mark them as complete fucking fish.
Mhm.
And it's just a straight up ego thing. I'll be sweating a guy just like, oh, this guy's fucking terrible, because he just sucks out on him one hand and just marks him
Mhm.
as fish. Terrible player. And he plays like that. He plays like that versus him the whole time. And then there's the exact opposite, the guys who just put these guys on a pedestal and just are really scared to play against these guys. Uh,
Mm.
there's, I don't know, there's just so many biases that can go into the game. And if you're not reflecting, not really learning from your experiences, and you can't really learn if you're just looking at everything from this lens of, bias, conservatism or overaggression or egotism.
For sure.
You're not really going to learn from your experiences. So I think, the best way to learn is kind of to play and put in those hours. But
Yep, definitely.
but
Which
if you're
is
not,
why a lot of it will come down to just grinding and putting in hours and studying. And like a lot of people think that if they just like study and like have these like epiphanies that they'll all of a sudden get better. But getting better in poker, at least for 99.99% of people, doesn't occur like that. It's both combined.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember one discussion I had with you, right, which was we were talking about how many tables to play in a
Mhm.
Team 6 out 1, and which was interesting because of Daryl, I started playing less tables. This is just basically one thing where you really opened up my mind to start searching for answers. Because I was like playing 4 to 6 tables, and I mean, I had like the best year maybe that I ever had in poker. Playing 4 to 6 tables, really super high focus,
Mhm.
picking up every single tell that I could, getting deep basically constantly. So I couldn't even add more tables. And then we talked about it in the group, and then you said, yeah, you need to play more tables, and then we started discussing it. And basically, one question raised my mind. It was like, how is it even possible? So I started asking people that were playing, for example, high stakes MTTs, and were playing like 12 to 15 tables. And I asked them, like, what
Mhm.
are the strategies that you use to play that many tables? I think that asking the right questions while learning and while playing. For example, if you just get to the poker tables and you'll be like, okay, I need to play. I need to play to get better at poker. I think
Mhm.
that's already the wrong approach. You should, in my opinion, I don't know what you think, but you should ask someone like you, for example, like Ryan, how do you stack your tables? What makes sense? What is like the biggest mistake that I can make when I stack my tables, when I cascade my tables, when I organize my tables? What is the biggest mistake? And only by what you are going to answer in that situation, I'm going to learn, or I'm going to save at least, I don't know, like 2% ROI over a full year, just because I don't organize my tables correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely agree with pretty much all of that. I think maybe you're making a little bit too concrete of statements. Like, for instance, like I definitely agree that to some degree, at least for where you were at, that it was really important for you to play more tables.
Yeah.
It's generally because I just felt where your game was at. Like I felt as though that sure, focusing on fewer tables can be fine, but you're focusing on fewer tables in a not necessarily a bad manner, but just in a suboptimal manner.
Exactly.
So like you're still playing like high variance games and situations. And because of that, like, you can't play, mostly on Sundays and mostly on stars and play 4 to 6 tables.
For sure.
It's like variance wise, it's just not going to work out for you. It'll just be, you'll have 6 month to year long downswings. It doesn't matter how big of like how much extra edge you gain by those couple of tables,
For sure.
there's no way that it can be big enough to justify much lower decreased volume unless
Just
for
quick
you personally.
just quick interjection. I think just because I know you'd kind of like really disagree with this, I think like
Mhm.
100% ROIs are possible for like people who like 4 to 6 table. But go ahead with what you're saying.
Uh, it depends on the game. Depends on the
Yeah, for
game.
sure.
100% ROI is definitely possible in, like, say, the Hot 44 or the Big 55 or the bigger 109 on Sunday or the Sunday Million or, maybe like, Sunday warm-up, on a special weekend, like that kind of stuff. Like, I definitely feel that, like, ROIs cap pretty low these days in the majority of, like, reg-filled games. And, like, the early $55 like 10K that starts like near the big 75 like that, there's no way more than like a 35% ROI is possible in that thing. There's no way that in like say a $35 180 that you can achieve much higher than a 30% ROI. There's just not that big of an edge to be had on like really good players, especially when the average player, like, you just aren't going to have much of an edge on them. So, like, I feel as though that ROIs these days are capped much lower. Thus, because of that, that volume is just really, really important. That being said, if there is a huge drop for you personally between playing 6 tables and playing 10 tables, then yeah, play 6 tables. But if you're playing 6 tables, you need to be playing the right 6 tables. You
Right.
can't just be playing Sunday majors on stars and playing large fields on stars. You need to be doing stuff like playing 888, playing iPoker, playing Winamax, .fr, playing only smaller fields on stars, playing, like, you need to run an average field size of like 400 or 500 or it's just not realistic.
Correct.
I'm fine with, like, I even strongly encourage people to play few tables, but when they play few tables, they need to be playing the right few tables or it's pointless. You can't play 6 tables and run a 3,000 average field size and expect to do well month to month. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, exactly. And
Even if you run a 70% ROI in those games, pull up the Noah SD tournament variance calculator. Even at a 60% ROI with the 2,000 average field size, you can still have like a 5,000 game downswing.
I think what
Which 5,000 game downswing is going to be at
Forever.
that volume.
Forever,
It's a year.
yeah, and I mean,
But that being said, if you're running a 500 average field size, hey, you aren't going to have big swings month to month. You'll still have swings, but for what you're playing, it will make sense.
for sure. I mean, the thing is really, I got into that conversation disagreeing with your opinion back then, but as we progressed in the talk, I started to, that's really my point here. There is a lot to learn. That there is a lot to learn, even if you think you're really good. Because just asking someone like you, like, how do you do that? And you just giving me like 1 or 2 hints, and then asking someone else, even when you're really good, or like even when you're like good, you can gain like a 1% edge just by talking to someone like you and asking a very simple question. And I think
Definitely.
what you just said about, talking, mentoring people, also ask someone else who is mentoring other people. Just ask them like the most simple questions. And if you get like a 0.2% ROI gain for the whole year, I mean, that's going to result in a lot of money, especially if you play
Definitely.
like mid to high stakes. And those are the things that I also highly encourage people to, like, ask for the little details that these people do, and you're gonna learn a ton. Not only the big stuff,
Yeah,
A
definitely.
lot of people focus on the big change, and I think like the small changes add up to a ton of stuff.
Right. Most people are focusing on, like, say, like too broad of things. Like, they'll focus on, why or like why they 4-bet light overall in certain spots, which is actually a really broad question. Or like they'll focus on like just specific hands. But I feel as though these days that things like the way in which you play, the way in which you set your tables, the games in which you play,
Yeah.
like, I feel as though those things matter like almost as much. And that, sure, discussing hands will be great, and like all those little adjustments will certainly help a lot. But like if you're focusing on like trying to make these like ridiculous changes quickly, like nothing's really going to happen or you're going to get frustrated.
Exactly.
Instead, you should just be focusing on having an open mind and constantly getting better, and then things will just happen.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned is exactly right. Just like the little things, just change little things. Don't change like a huge thing at once, and then you get discouraged, or it doesn't work out.
Yeah, like great perfect example was, so the way in which I play poker like shifted a lot. First, I used to play like really tight, aggressive, and really straightforward because I started in Turbo 180s. So that's, you just play straightforward, and that's how you'd make money. And I learned short stack poker, and I focused on that. And then like as I started to play like deeper stack games, I tried to stop playing tight aggressive and started to play like really loose aggressive, because like that's how all the good players play. Like they play loose aggressive. So like I tried to jump from playing like tight aggressive to loose aggressive, and it was just horrific. It was terrible. It was very bad. However, that jump helped me learn why certain things were good with each different type of play. And then as my logic of the game and math of the game and overall theory of the game slowly grew, I started to be able to find which situations make sense to play in certain styles. And having an open mind to each is how you start to adjust really quickly and start to play much better overall. So it wasn't like all of a sudden playing the certain style that really helped me out. It was instead learning each trick and each little situation from each, and each mindset approach from each, and having those slowly enter into my game and have that really help me out. So like right now, my game overall, like I can't really say that I play a specific style because I don't really. Instead, I approach situations, analyze situations, and then make my decision. And overall, based off of certain table type, sure, I might play loose aggressive based off of that table, but it's not because I play loose aggressive, it's because those situations just happen to occur. Great example would be, LAPC. So my plan going into LAPC on day one was to play fairly straightforward, figure out things, and, see what happened. And I thought going into it that I would be like, maybe not the tightest player at the table, but, definitely like middle of the pack. Instead, I was by far the most aggressive, and it's just because these situations occurred. I ended up 3-betting a friend of mine like 12 times that day, Justin Young.
Yeah.
I literally 3-bet him 12 times over the course of like, I guess it would have been 8 hours of play. And I wasn't planning on 3-betting him in any given situation. It's just these situations occurred.
Correct.
And because they occurred, I took them. And going into the day, I didn't want to play in a certain manner. I expected to play in a certain manner, but that's just because of the kind of event that it was. But instead of playing in that specific kind of manner that I thought I would, instead I ended up playing entirely differently, and it's just because of the situations that I was put into.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, for sure.
And I feel as though just like having a really open mind, not just with how you're approaching learning the game, but how you're approaching like the theory behind the game and the math behind the game, how you're approaching situations at the table, just everything in general with poker. Having an open mind is just so, so, so key.
Yeah.
Especially having an open mind when you're arguing things. Like, I feel as though so the way that I learn when I'm discussing hands with people is that I will argue whatever end of it to a really aggressive degree. And it's not necessarily because I strongly believe in my side of it. It's because I try to figure out exactly why the other person approaches the way that they do. So I'll ask a ton of different questions about it. I will, suggest certain things and try to get an in-depth understanding of the way that they're approaching it. And then once I understand why they approach it from the way that they do, then I try to decide if I agree or disagree. So like my argument with with Dan O'Brien, I'm sure I was fairly aggressively arguing my side, which is why you were probably somewhat surprised that I went, oh yeah, I agree with you. I wasn't aggressively arguing because I was staunchly arguing my side. I was arguing to figure out what points exactly he was making, how he viewed it, and why. And then once I understood that, I was able to see if I was correct or not, and if I agreed with him or not. And then once I figured out the exact thought process and way that he was approaching it, I was able to make my decision based off of that.
Yeah, I love that as a teaching method. I use that pretty often, like just devil's advocate pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good for obviously that, but it's also just good for showing leaks in their thought process. Because I think if you just take a surface hand and you don't go very hard with them, or you kind of agree with them, whatever, maybe their surface thought sounds right, but then you show them like, okay, well, I have this counter here. Then, like, how do you counter that? Then they counter that. Then I'll, like, go to, like, the next one. Then I'll go to, like, the next one. Then eventually I'll just, like, say, like, actually I agreed with, like, the way you played the hand. I just wanted to
make sure
how...
that you understood the whole situation and not just are parroting why this happened.
Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
I definitely strongly agree. I feel as though that a lot of people these days will, especially with like how advanced poker information is these days, that they will learn something from someone that they strongly respect, and then they will not just start to do it, but they will like it. They might even like have it explained why they did what they did, and expect and continue working that into their game, and think that it just ends there, but it doesn't. There was a somewhat recent Galfon video on Reddit once where he approaches this situation that looks like really simple. I think it was like, so heads up game, big blind opens, and he discussed this like somewhat raggedy flop, and it was like, our opponent c-bets, and what do we do? And he spent the entire 50-minute video discussing that one situation. The entire 50 minutes on that one situation, on breaking apart the decision tree as to why we are supposed to do certain things in that situation, certain sizings in that situation with certain parts of our range, and then breaking it down mathematically, what makes the most sense based off of how our opponent is supposed to approach it, and then adjusting it also based off of how they're going to approach it or not. And he spent an entire 50 minutes on what most people would say, oh yeah, it's an easy check call, check whatever, based off of what hand we have. And if you look at it, the overall situation, not just based off of what that flop is, but what the average turn card is going to be, all the different factors, like there isn't a single spot in poker that's like really simple. For instance, perfect example. Another perfect example would be, so like in heads-up hypers these days, so the guys who back me, they're the main guys, one of the best heads-up hyper players. And I've been like, watching him play and learning a decent amount from him. And something that would probably surprise most people is that good heads-up hyper regs have limp ranges on the button with like 7 big blinds.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And like that's something that even as much as like a year ago everyone would go like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But like if you look at everything behind why you would have something like that, and you approach it and you think about it and you look at the math and theory behind it, it makes perfect sense, and it's very obvious as to why they should be doing those things. It's just it takes so much, even that kind of situation is a lot more complex than what it appears to be on the surface. So if you just have a basic situation, like, for instance, c-betting a certain sizing in a certain situation, if you just accept that you're supposed to c-bet there with, your hand versus these types of players, and you accept that that is standard and normal, and then you don't really focus on trying to figure out in the future whether it's actually best, you're going to like get into this overall rut that you won't really get out of, because you will think, hey, I know the situation. Why am I focusing back on it? But instead, what you should be doing is going back and through and analyzing, especially now, analyzing things that you take for granted, and then seeing if you are still actually doing the correct thing, and not just the correct thing based off of that specific opponent, but also just versus certain opponents in general, in certain game types in general, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, a cool
That's
way I like to look at it is like take a spot that someone tries to learn, right? So maybe they watch a video, they learn the idea, they try and implement it. Say, since it's kind of new, they implement it with, I'm just going to throw out a random percentage, like 50% accuracy, right? Then, if they gain more insight, or if they were a top-level player in that spot, maybe it would be like 90%. And then, like, an even higher-level player might play that spot correctly 95% of the time. And, like, the elite guys might be, like, 99% of the time, or 99.9, whatever. The numbers are arbitrary. And you can't get to that high levels of consistency without just really deep understanding of the game. Just because there's so many subtleties.
All right, definitely.
It's so different. I remember I had a coaching session a week or two ago where we literally spent 1 hour just talking about a guy opening with 30 big blinds in a middle position. Literally just spent an hour on it. And the game is just so subtle and so deep. And there's some thought processes that, you could have a really shallow thought process and with a new idea and still be right, like a decent percentage of the time with it.
Yeah.
And it seems like you understand the spot, but you really don't.
Yeah, I feel as though that a lot of regs these days think that the level of poker knowledge, like, I feel as though that even the best player that I can think of, let's say, how about like Dan Smith? I think that his poker knowledge right now, if you put like the total poker knowledge, let's say you made it like 100-foot long line, I think that his poker knowledge, as far as what is absolutely possible, might be at like the 20% point, and that's it.
Wow.
And it's like because there's that 80% of knowledge that even he can gain, that I feel as though that you should always be working incredibly hard. I don't think that with maybe within our lifetime there will be a computer that will be good enough to make the distance between that 20% and that 100% point. But I don't think a human is necessarily really capable of playing poker at a perfect level. I don't think that there's like maybe there one day there might be like someone who plays like close to that level. But like even if you look at a game like chess, where all the information is available, there still isn't anyone capable of playing chess perfectly. It's not possible.
Yeah.
And chess is much simpler as far as the amount of variables possible, simply because all the variables are known and there. Well, with poker, there's so much unknown variables that playing it perfectly in each exact situation, it's so difficult. And especially as the game like evolves as quickly as it does, the only way you're going to keep getting further and further along that line and closer to 100% of poker perfection, which doesn't exist, is by constantly having an open mind and working really, really, really hard and constantly getting better.
Yeah, there is one guy that comes to mind for me. I guess you both know him, George95.
Yeah,
You both know him,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And if I'm just taking a look at the graph right now. He won 2.1 million pre-rake back, plus he made 2.9 million in rake. And I don't know if you watched his video, but he said something very similar to what you are just explaining. He said, my skill level and the perfect poker player, we are very, very far away from each other. And this guy plays 5K and 10K hyper-turbos and MTTs and whatever, any buy-in, and he just crushes everything. And he literally in that video said like 2 or 3 times, I think, that he's very far away from being like a perfect poker player.
The best that he can, or
Exactly.
even the best that he can be.
Exactly. Yeah,
Like
the best that
I
he can
think,
be.
I think my level now of knowledge and poker ability and everything, I think 5 years from now I will laugh at how bad I was. How bad I
I
was.
laughed about it how bad I was last year. Like 6 months
Yeah,
ago. It's
definitely.
like crazy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you can't do that, that you were doing something wrong with the way that you were studying and trying to get
For
better,
sure.
and you weren't working hard enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally agree. All right, so Pedro, you want to ask your final questions that you always ask?
Sure. So my favorite question in the end for you is, right now, I would put you in a situation where you could travel back in time exactly 5 years, and
Mhm.
you have either like 2 or 3 sentences or like 10 seconds to talk to yourself. What would you tell yourself?
Hmm.
10
Let's
seconds
see.
max.
Um. Okay. I think I've got a pretty good idea. I guess I would just focus on telling myself to be grateful for the things that I have and focus on the things that I control, uh, things that I can control, and that if I do that, that I will be happy and successful, and that nothing else matters.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like happiness. Yeah, I love that.
Cool one. Is that your only question? You
Yeah.
have a second one, don't you?
No, 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 no.
Yeah,
That's
that's your only one. I just asked like favorite book or books plural if you want
Um,
or video.
that's a deep rabbit hole for me. Uh, I'm a huge, huge, huge book nerd, so I'll just list off favorite authors. So Robert A. Heinlein, um, Robert Jordan.
Are
Let's
these
see.
like fiction guys?
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, Orson Scott Card used to be on that list, but for a lot of reasons he's not anymore. So Brandon Sanderson, Spider Robinson. Let's see here. One second. I can bring up my. Those are like the main ones. There's some other like sci-fi authors who can definitely like be on that list, but I would definitely say that Robert Jordan, Robert A. Heinlein, Spider Robinson, and Brandon Sanderson are like definitely my top authors right now. So Robert A. Heinlein, essentially, he's considered the godfather of sci-fi. Um, he's like most of his books came from or were written in like the 50s, 60s, maybe some in the 40s, but mostly like 50s and 60s. Like he wrote Starship Troopers. He wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, Citizen of the Galaxy, and for his era, his books were very liberal and very forward thinking. Like he has characters who are very obviously bisexual. He has like polyamorous relationships, like that kind of stuff. And his writing is just very, very, very good. It's great character building, great like storylines, that kind of stuff. Robert Jordan, he wrote a book series called The Wheel of Time. He spent
Oh
his
wow.
pretty much his entire life writing it and died before he could finish it.
Wow.
And luckily, the his wife uh, convinced Brandon Sanderson to finish it. So
Huh.
he wrote the last novel by turning it into 3 books, and it was wonderfully done. So it's just an epic 13, well, technically 12 book, but effectively 14 book, like super masterpiece that is wonderful. It's essentially, it's like, best way to explain it would be Lord of the Rings meets Game of Thrones
Wow.
Huh.
Okay, that's pretty
with
crazy.
a modern and his style of writing is like pretty much the in between of like um modern sci or modern fantasy writers and like Tolkien. So he still has like he's incredibly depth with like building and character development, but also the way in which he writes, it's very poetic to some degree. He doesn't just like explain. He tries to like bring you into the world and then does it in a very like stylized manner. So like just that world building stuff, he's just like the best at it. And it was such a good series.
I'm
And then
absolutely sold. I'm like getting chills just like hearing the explanation of this book. It sounds like
and
right up my alley, basically.
oh, then you'd love it. And
Yeah.
it's like the average book is like 700 pages, so
Yeah.
it's like 10, I think in total it's like 10,000 pages, like 2,000 unique characters, like 140
Whoa.
main
That's
characters.
insane. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
reading
it's
Game of Thrones
ridiculous.
right now and just loving it. I'm on
I
book
actually
3.
didn't like Game of Thrones. I didn't like his writing style. I didn't think it was very good. I
Interesting.
think like his storylines are great. His like he built a very interesting world with very interesting world and very interesting characters, but Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan just spoiled me. So like I always compare authors to like them, and it hurts me a lot because of that. I just thought that like that that George R. R. Martin's writing was very dry, and going to something very dry that wasn't like really poetic and really engaging like Robert Jordan, that I just couldn't do it. It reminded me too much of like Tolkien.
Mhm.
And
Have
then
you
Brandon,
read all of Game of Thrones?
no, I just read like 2 books.
Okay, yeah. It's
I
definitely dry
love
at
the TV
times.
show. The TV show is amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's so good.
Incredible.
for sure.
So good.
Especially at the start. Is incredible.
Brand. Oh yeah, definitely. Brandon Sanderson is like a very, very modern, much more, I would say, immature version of Robert Jordan. It's not really true anymore, but like his books are aimed at, or for a lot of his books were aimed at more like young adults. Like his Mistborn series, which is really good. Really, really interesting worlds, really interesting characters, but a much more like fast-paced writing. So it's not like poetic. It's not like art in itself. It's just really interesting, really fast-paced, really entertaining. However, his newest book series, The Way of Kings, and the sequel to it, The Words of Radiance, he started to write those after he finished the Wheel of Time series. And he spent like 2 years writing the Wheel of Time, finishing the last book for Robert Jordan. So, and you can tell that there's a ridiculous difference between his writing before the Wheel of Time series and after. It's like he grew as a writer between those two. And he said that the book series, that Way of Kings, and that series, it's supposed to be a 7-book series, that's a series that he's wanted to write his entire career.
Yeah.
And he's written like he has like 30 major books published that have all done really, really well. And now he's writing his series that he sees as his masterpiece. And he didn't even start getting it down really until after he finished the Wheel of Time series, because he learned from Robert Jordan's like writing style and trying to emulate his writing, and he did a great job. Like there's a difference between the Wheel of Time series pre-Sanderson and post-Sanderson. Like there is a very distinct difference between the two styles, but they're close enough that it's almost that the writing definitely is an homage to Jordan.
Okay.
Cool. So last question is just, do you have any morning routines?
Currently, no, not really, because I'm in Wisconsin. But when I'm in Toronto, goal is to work out 30 minutes to an hour. I'll do like obviously I'll like shower, brush, all that, all that stuff. I'll actually like get dressed too. Always try to have. I treat, excuse me, my poker grinding like the actual job that it is, which is I get myself ready in the morning and I get focused and ready to go, and so I'm fully dressed and functioning. I don't just roll out of bed and start grinding. I did that in the past, definitely didn't work out that great, so now I definitely treat it like it is 100% the job that it is and treat it very seriously as such. And so morning workout, a light breakfast, nothing too heavy, And yeah, just completely get ready in the morning. And then, so my plan is at the end of sessions, I will be doing hand history reviews of my deepest run of the day. And then if I, for whatever reason, I don't have time to do it that night, then I'll do it in the morning before I start my grind session. That way, and while I am working out and stuff, I'll probably be listening to things like just training videos and that kind of stuff and trying to get my brain going and moving and functioning. So I won't just listen to music when I work out. I'll probably do like audiobooks and podcasts and also listen to like training videos and that kind of stuff. That way when I hop into my first game, I will be playing my A plus game until I'm too exhausted to not play my A plus game. Then I will be streaming the ends of my sessions with commentary and webcam. So my last, like, essentially for while I have 4 tables up and less, I'll be doing that kind of stuff, which will probably help me focus to some degree and stay on top of my game. And yeah, I'm definitely like, I feel as though like having that kind of routine will definitely help a lot. I also think the fact that, so my fiance will be with me in Toronto also. So in April, I will be definitely taking 2 days off a week. So we'll do stuff like walk the city, hang out with friends. My plan. So I got really lucky. I got an apartment in the same building complex as my backers. So I'll be playing like basketball with them a couple days a week, just like really trying to stay balanced and stay focused and, try to have a good solid routine, try to constantly work on my game, discuss hands with them and friends. I'm in a couple really good group chats that definitely help me out a lot. So hopefully because of that, you'll see me doing really well over the next couple of months on
For
Stars.
sure.
All right, cool,
Good
man.
mindset.
Anything you want to promote or anything?
Yeah, my Twitch is so twitch.tv// Protentialmn. So same as my Stars name, except instead of an O, it's a 0. So PR0 Potentialmn. And then my coaching website is pokerprotential.com.
Protential.
Yeah, pokerprotential.com.
Cool.
All right, man.
Awesome.
Thanks for giving us your time. Really appreciate it, man. It's cool.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. Just let me know when it's posted, and I'll give some tweets and retweets and all that kind of fun stuff.
Cool.
I had fun discussing with you guys, and definitely look forward to seeing you guys at the tables and having more discussions.
Okay, man.
All right,
Have
man.
an awesome
Talk to you
time.
later.
Bye.
All right, talk to you later. Thanks. See you.
Yeah.